Welcome to California State University Chico's online field instructor orientation. You are beginning Module 3. The learning objectives for Module 3 include understanding the purpose of the learning contract, identifying components of a learning contract, and finally identifying the competencies that will be included in a learning contract. The purpose of a learning contract includes establishing objectives for the student. The objectives need to be feasible and they need to be attainable. The learning contract also serves as a tool to identify what the student will learn and what activities the student will be a part of during their field practicum. It's considered a working document and a guide for supervision throughout the year. The learning contract is a collaborative effort between the student, the field instructor, and the faculty liaison. There are three components in a learning contract: learning goals, which essentially speak to where the student is going during the field practicum; learning tasks that will identify specific activities about how they get to those goals or accomplish those goals; and finally a time frame for accomplishing the tasks. So with each task that is assigned, there should be a date that indicates when you want the student to have completed that task. Planning for what will be included in the student's field practicum and essentially the learning contract really should begin during the first couple weeks of the placement. Some things to consider include: what are the students' goals? As they look at their field practicum for the year and the specific agency and population they will be serving, what goals do they have? It's also important to take into consideration the student's experience level. What previous employment may they have had or volunteer experience? Considering what their learning style is another important factor. Their strengths and limitations, and also motivation and interests. For example, if you have a student and perhaps one of their goals is to develop group facilitation skills, the tasks might include shadowing other groups that are being offered in your agency. They might also include reading articles about the specific topic that that group addresses or the population that is participating in that group. You might ultimately ask the student to develop an exercise that could be used in the course of that group. Again, part of what you'll want to consider is the learning style of that student. If they're a visual learner, they may need to observe several group sessions before they would feel comfortable developing a group exercise. If they're a kinesthetic learner, they may be someone who really needs the opportunity to develop the exercise earlier on and a chance to then implement the exercise, look at how it went, what worked, what didn't work about it. So considering all of those qualities are important as you look at developing the goals and tasks for the learning contract. There are 10 core competency areas that the Council on Social Work Education has developed for social work students. They include identifying as a professional social worker and conducting oneself accordingly, applying social work ethical principles to guide professional practice, applying critical thinking to inform and communicate professional judgments, engaging in diversity and difference in practice, advancing human rights and social and economic justice, engaging in research-informed practice and practice-informed research, applying knowledge of human behavior in the social environment, engaging in policy practice to advance social and economic well-being and deliver effective social work services, responding to organizational contexts that shape practice, and engaging, assessing, intervening, and evaluating individuals, families, groups, organizations, and communities. We often find that agencies may struggle with research and policy learning goals and objectives. And on our website, we will post some examples of possible learning goals and objectives in this area, but for example, in policy, you may want to have students identify legislation and create a one-page fact sheet that speaks to legislation that impacts the services your agency provides. Students also are required in their policy classes to analyze a particular policy and advocate for it. As a field instructor, you may want to ask what policy they have chosen in their policy class and ask them to share with your agency and staff what they have then done in terms of developing an advocacy plan for that policy. On the research end of things, you could have a student examine some existing research about a particular problem or population or intervention that your agency may be using or may be considering using, and then have them prepare a presentation for their colleagues about that. You could also have students interview their colleagues in the agency and inquire about what theories inform their practice. They can then bring that back to supervision and discuss that with you. These are just a couple of examples that you can use in terms of looking at research and policy areas. We also will have an example of a learning contract posted under the agency field instructor resources that will have specific examples in each of the 10 competency areas. As stated, students are expected to formulate goals in each competency areas, and keep in mind that the goals should be reflective of the student's academic level. So if you have a BSW or a foundation year student versus a concentration, which is an advanced year student, you would want to make the goals apropos for their level. There are 3 areas that you can consider as you look at activities to include in a learning contract: agency services, personal development, and professional development. With each competency area, the student is expected to list specific goals, ways they'll achieve them, and describe how learning in this area will be evaluated. So you'll have a date that says when the student will have completed that task, and also where it will be evaluated or how it will be evaluated. Will it be evaluated in a discussion in supervision? Will it be evaluated based on a presentation? Or will it be evaluated based on an outcome or a product that they produce, perhaps a resource binder, something along that lines? Agency learning goals pertain to the nature of the work that's done by the agency. So potentially considering tasks that would help the student learn what the services and programs the agency provides, the agency history, philosophy, structure, or funding, nature of the client population, agency policies and procedures, application of the generalist method to specific cases or assignments, so helping the student look at on a micro level, individual level, how would you intervene? On a more meso, group or family level, what might your case plan include? And finally, on a macro level, community or organizational level, what might your plan or your intervention include? Having students read agency policies and procedures and funding sources is a learning task that can be assigned under the policy competency and also the research competency. Researching information on the nature of the client population can be assigned under the research competency as well. Personal learning goals would include some of the following: helping the student identify differences between their personal and professional boundaries, personal blocks they may have to effective social work practice, increasing their self-awareness in relation to human diversity issues, cultural and lifestyle differences, or disadvantaged groups, women's issues, etc. And finally, personal values that help or may hinder effective practice. Increasing self-awareness can be assigned under values and ethics competency, as well as diversity, by asking students to learn more about a particular population they're working with, and then have them describe to you the differences they have become aware of as a result of that research. Professional learning goals will include having the student identify the development of skills and knowledge bases that they feel are necessary to perform the role of a social worker in your agency. Accountability to client systems, maintaining confidentiality, keeping appointments, following through on plans. So here you're going to really be looking at the student in terms of, are they showing up on time? Are they making their appointments? Are they following through with phone calls, with getting clients in touch with resources that maybe they have agreed to provide? Are they understanding the importance of confidentiality and maintaining confidentiality? Learning to work as part of a team with agency staff is another important professional learning goal. If you've asked them to work with another agency member, what are they doing to ensure that that work is happening? What have they done to establish rapport with that person? When they've been assigned tasks, that they follow through to begin to build the trust level with that team that they're working with? And finally, identification of client concerns and problems. Are they beginning to understand the client concerns, the barriers that this population may be facing? Communication and interviewing skills are another area of professional development. And this can be accomplished by having them interview other staff in your agency in regards to their practice interventions. It can help establish good communication because you can get feedback then from those staff members that they interviewed to see how that process went. Problem solving is another area of professional development. What does the student do? Do they seem to be integrating a process by which they understand how to resolve a problem and seek resources? Diversity. Are they really open to the idea of working with very diverse clients or consumers? Community resources. Are they developing a better understanding of the community resources and able to make appropriate referrals? Social work practice methods. Do you find that they are effective in terms of establishing rapport with clients or consumers and beginning to develop relationships? Are they collecting data as needed? During assessments, are they able to gather the information that they need? Are they able to begin a conversation with you about what an appropriate intervention or case plan might look like? Do they have some ideas about how they would evaluate whether or not their work they're doing is making a difference? And finally, are they talking about termination? Do they have an understanding of the importance of talking about termination? Integrating and applying academic knowledge and theory to actual social work situations is an important part of a professional learning experience for a student. So helping the student begin to connect what they're learning in the classroom with the work that they're actually doing in the agency. Asking questions in regards to what social work values guided that interaction that you had with that client, what knowledge base were you using, what practice intervention would you consider with this particular client? All of those kinds of questions will help your student begin to really integrate academic knowledge and theory with social work practice. As mentioned in previous modules, we are a generalist social work program. So our goal is to have students have the opportunity to work on a micro practice level, which is with individuals, perhaps in the form of doing case management, individual counseling, advocacy, or brokering. On the meso level, or the family or group level, attending a team or a multidisciplinary team meeting, attending support, educational or recreational or socialization groups, making home visits, and participating in family interviews. These are all activities that can help meet that criteria for a meso practice experience. On a macro level, the community or organizational level, it could be having the student identify the techniques of an agency's administrative decision-making style. It could be asking the student to write a letter to the editor regarding an issue that impacts the client population your agency is serving. It could be having the student attend a board meeting so that they can understand the function of the board for your particular agency organization. Those are all examples of activities at those various levels of practice that you could have your student participate in. You will probably find that a particular learning activity or task that you assign to a student may fit in more than one competency area. It's perfectly acceptable for you to use the same learning activity in more than one competency area on the learning contract. Reviewing the student evaluation that's stored on the IPT software system is also an opportunity for you to look at practice behaviors that are described in each of these competency areas, and it may provide some insight or guidance for how to identify learning activities in your agency that will help the student meet that competency area. That evaluation can be found on our website, also under the Agency Field Instructor Resources link. The learning contract is actually drafted by the student in consultation with their agency field instructor. The final form is signed by the student, the field instructor, and the faculty liaison. All three people should keep a copy of that. The learning contract form is found on the agency field instructor resource link. And as I mentioned earlier, there will also be a sample learning contract that has examples of potential learning activities or tasks in the various competency areas. Upon completion of this module, we hope that you've developed an understanding of the purpose of the learning contract, identified components of a learning contract, and understand the competencies that will need to be included in a learning contract.